At Christmas dinner, my daughter-in-law called me a burden. My son didn't say a word. I just looked at both of them, folded my napkin neatly next to my plate, and smiled. See, while Chloe thought she had just humiliated me, I was already running a mental checklist of every single bill paid out of my bank account. Electricity, heating, groceries, car insurance, high-speed internet. That very night, I canceled the first auto pay. It happened right in the middle of Christmas dinner. I was sitting quiet at the large oak dining table, the one my late husband had built with his own 2 hands, just looking at Chloe. My son Julian kept his eyes glued to his plate, dead silent. "It's just too cramped in here," Chloe said, swirling her wine. "We really need the basement apartment for my home office. You could easily move into one of those assisted living communities, Martha. Honestly, you're just a financial drain on this household anyway." That was the lie she told herself. The truth was, my bank account covered the electric bill, the gas, and the massive weekly grocery haul for the entire house every single month. They were living in my home rent-free. I didn't cry. I didn't even try to defend myself. I just set my napkin down, stood up, and took my dishes to the kitchen. "Just think about it," Chloe called out after me. "It would be for the best." I went down to my suite on the first floor and shut the door. No slamming, just a soft, final click. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. It was time to restructure the household. First, I logged into my banking portal. That recurring transfer for the utility bills for the whole house deleted. The shared household account I put $1,200 into every month frozen. The monthly draft for Chloe's boutique gym membership, the one that accidentally got set up on my card and was never corrected. Canceled. I didn't feel hurt. I felt a cold, crystalline calm. I was 65 years old, healthy, and I wasn't about to be treated like a house guest in a home I owned. I pulled a duffel bag out of the closet and packed the essentials. Not forever, just for a few days. I'd wanted a getaway to the hot springs in Asheville for a long time. Now seemed like the perfect moment. As I packed my walking shoes, I heard Chloe blast music upstairs. She was already celebrating her supposed victory. She thought she'd broken me. The next morning, as I loaded my bag into the car and turned the key, my phone buzzed. A notification from the bank, the first stop payment had been processed. Perfect. The warm mineral water of the spa pool wrapped around me. No loud voices, no snide comments, no dishes to clear. I leaned my head back against the edge and closed my eyes. I'd been here in the Blue Ridge Mountains for 2 days now. 2 days of absolute silence. I kept my phone on silent most of the time, but I knew exactly what was happening back home. Reality was finally catching up with Julian and Chloe. Around noon, while I was lounging with a cup of peppermint tea, Julian called. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Mom, where are you?" he asked, his voice sounding frantic and unsteady. "You didn't even say goodbye." "I'm on vacation, Julian, taking some time for myself," I replied calmly. "Vacation? But, Mom, we got mail. From the electric company. It says the auto pay was revoked. And when Chloe tried to use the household card at the grocery store, it was declined." "What's going on? Did the bank screw up?" He sounded almost like a child. He had never bothered to learn how the bills actually worked. "No mistake," I said, taking a sip of tea. "Chloe was right. I'm a burden on the household. So I decided to stop standing in your way financially. You're both adults. From now on, you'll be covering your own expenses." "But Mom, you can't just do that." "We didn't budget for this month at all," he cried, sounding horrified. "That's your job now, Julian, not mine. I've done my part long enough." I didn't wait for his excuses or for Chloe's screaming in the background. I just hung up and put the phone back in my bag. It felt good, better than I expected. No more arguing, no more endless explanations. Just cold, hard facts. I stood up and headed back toward the sauna. My old life was over. That evening, I got a text from Chloe. It was a single vitriolic sentence that told me exactly how hard I'd hit her where it hurt. She demanded I come back and fix this immediately. She was barking at the moon. 3 days later, I pulled into the driveway, feeling refreshed. The house looked the same, but the atmosphere was heavy. The second I unlocked the front door, Chloe was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, face flushed with anger. "There you are! Finally!" she barked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The fridge is empty, and Julian had to dip into his savings just to keep the lights on. You can't just cut us off like that." I didn't say a word. I took my coat off and hung it up. Words were useless here. Chloe only understood action. I walked right past her to the kitchen, grabbed a toolbox from the pantry, and headed down to the basement. That's where the large storage cellar was, the one filled with months' worth of food. I'd bought canned goods, pasta, expensive olive oil, coffee beans. Chloe followed me down, huffing. "What are you doing? Are you even listening to me?" I pulled a heavy-duty hasp and a padlock out of the box. With the steady hands my husband had taught me to use, I screwed the latch onto the wooden door of the pantry. "I'm securing my property," I said over the low hum of the power drill. "Since you're running your own household now, you'll need to buy your own groceries. This is my private stock." Chloe stared at me, her mouth hanging open. She had clearly expected me to cave, to apologize, or at least to scream back. But I gave her nothing to hook into. I snapped the padlock shut with a satisfying thud and slipped the only key into my pocket. "This is ridiculous," she stammered. "You're treating us like enemies in our own home." I turned slowly and looked her right in the eye. My expression was perfectly still. Then I said the words that changed everything. "It isn't your house, Chloe," I said, my voice soft but ice cold. "I own it outright. And if you two plan on staying, we're going to need to sit down and discuss a formal lease agreement." She went dead silent. Perfect. That evening, I sat at the dining table with a glass of water. In front of me was a standard lease agreement I'd printed out. Nothing fancy, just the basics. Julian came home from work looking exhausted and tossed his bag in the corner. Chloe had obviously intercepted him at the door and told him everything. He walked tentatively toward the table while she stood in the background with her arms folded. "Mom, what is all this?" he asked quietly. "Elise, we're family. You can't seriously expect us to pay rent." "Family members don't exploit each other, Julian," I replied, sliding the papers toward him. "You've lived here for 3 years for free. I supported you so you could build up a nest egg. Instead, Chloe picked up expensive hobbies, and you both spent money like there was no tomorrow. Starting the first of next month rent is $1,500. That's well below market value for this neighborhood." Chloe scoffed. $1,500, dream on. "We aren't signing anything. You can't just throw us out. And what about the Wi-Fi? You changed that this afternoon too." I nodded slowly. I did. The contract is in my name. I changed the password because I pay for the service. If you need internet, you'll have to set up your own account. As for the lease, you don't have to sign it. Julian looked relieved for a split second. "See, Chloe? She doesn't mean it." "No, Julian, I interrupted gently. You don't have to sign, but if you don't have it signed by Friday, I'm going to start clearing out the guest suite and the garage this weekend. I'll be listing those rooms for rent to local college students. This house is plenty big enough for boarders. And the car in the garage, that's legally mine, too. The relief evaporated from his face instantly. Chloe's eyes went wide. She knew she was stranded without that car. I set my pen down on the contract and stood up. It was high time they learned the actual value of the life they'd been living. The next morning, the house was filled with a frigid silence. I made my breakfast, drank my coffee, and read the paper. Julian had already left for work on his bike. Around 9, Chloe came downstairs fully made up and dressed in expensive yoga gear. She pointedly ignored me, grabbed her purse, and headed for the key rack by the door. That's where the spare keys to the SUV usually hung. The hook was empty. She spun around, her eyes narrowing. "Where are the car keys?" she snapped. "I have a Pilates class downtown at 10. I need the car." I slowly turned the page of my newspaper. "The car isn't in the garage," I said casually. "I moved it to a secure long-term parking lot by the train station last night. I've kept both sets of keys. Since the vehicle is registered in my name, and I pay for the insurance and taxes, I'll be the one deciding who drives it from now on." Chloe gasped, literally grasping for air. "That's theft." "No, Chloe, that's property rights," I corrected her gently. "You're more than welcome to take the bus. The stop is only 5 minutes away, and it runs every half hour." Very convenient. Her hands were shaking with rage. She grabbed her phone and started typing furiously, likely complaining to her friends about her evil mother-in-law. It didn't bother me. As she tapped away at the screen, I felt an incredible sense of weight lifting. For years, I'd stayed quiet just to keep the peace. I'd put my own needs on the back burner so they could live their luxury lifestyle. That was over. Chloe finally stomped out the front door, slamming it behind her. I took the last sip of my coffee. It was cold now, and smiled. The new boundaries were working, but I knew the real confrontation was still coming. Julian would have to talk to me tonight. He was stuck in the middle, and he finally had to make a choice about his own future. I'd wait and see. Early that evening, there was a soft knock on my door. I knew it was Julian. Chloe would have just barged in. I opened the door and let him in. He looked drained, his shoulders slumped. "Can we talk, Mom?" he asked softly, sitting on my sofa. "Of course," I said, taking my armchair and waiting. "Chloe is losing it over the car and the pantry. Please just put things back the way they were. She's crying and I can't take this constant stress. We're family. Can't we find a compromise?" I looked at my son. He had always been the type to run from a fight. "A compromise requires both sides to give something, Julian," I explained. "So far, I've been the only one giving. I've let myself be used in silence." I stood up, went to my desk, and pulled out a thin folder. I laid it on the coffee table in front of him. "Open it," I commanded. He hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside were 3 years of bank statements neatly organized. Every expense I'd covered for them was highlighted in yellow. Electricity, water heat, insurance, groceries, home repairs. Added up, Julian. It's tens of thousands of dollars every year. Money that was supposed to be for my retirement and my care when I get older. You two spent it. Chloe calls me a burden, but these numbers prove the exact opposite. I've been carrying you. Julian stared at the yellow highlights. The color drained from his face. He clearly had never realized the total. He had just assumed things got paid. "Mom, I didn't know." he stammered. Now you do, I said firmly. The lease is still upstairs on the table. If it isn't signed by Friday, I'm renting out the rooms. That isn't going to change. He swallowed hard and slowly closed the folder. We both knew Chloe would hate this, but it was no longer my responsibility to absorb her anger. Friday night, Chloe decided to rebel. She had apparently decided she wasn't going to let me tell her what to do. Around 8 p.m., several of her friends showed up. They brought loud music, clinking bottles, and obnoxious laughter. The bass from the speakers vibrated through the ceiling of my apartment. They were insanely stomping on the hardwood floors directly above my head. I knew she was trying to bait me. She was waiting for me to storm upstairs so she could make a scene in front of her friends, play the role of the poor, oppressed daughter-in-law. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I sat comfortably in my wingback chair, sipping herbal tea and reading a good book. When the music got even louder, at 10 o'clock at night, I put my book down. I didn't need the police, and I didn't need an argument. I owned the house, and I knew exactly how the wiring worked. I went down to the basement, straight to the main breaker box. The wiring was old, but very clearly labeled. There were separate breakers for the first floor and the upper level where the party was happening. I opened the gray metal door, found the main switch for the upstairs, and flipped it with a solid clack. The bass cut out instantly. Through the ceiling, I heard shouts of surprise, followed by the confused murmurs of the guests. The lights were out. The sound system was dead. I locked the breaker box, took the key, and put it in my pocket. Then I walked back to my room. A few minutes later, I heard the first guests leaving. The party was over. Chloe would be livid, but she was currently sitting in the dark. She thought she could treat me with disrespect in my own home. But real power isn't about yelling or drama. Real power is controlling the things that matter. Without power, there's no party. I knew tomorrow morning would be unpleasant, but I was ready for it. I was actually looking forward to it. When I went out to get the mail Saturday morning, Chloe was standing in the doorway. She had deep circles under her eyes and looked like she hadn't slept a wink. "You cut the power on us," she hissed. "The fridge was off half the night. Open the basement door right now." I folded the paper and shook my head slowly. "The power is back on, Chloe." I flipped it at 6 a.m. "The party's over after all," I said calmly. "You didn't sign the lease yesterday. That was your choice." Julian came down the stairs looking nervous. "Mom, Chloe's right, last night was too much," he said quietly. "We're moving out. We aren't doing this anymore. We'll find our own place where we can live in peace." He sounded defiant, like a teenager threatening to run away. He honestly thought I'd break down and beg them to stay. He expected me to be sorry. Instead, I nodded. "I think that's a very wise decision," I said. I went to my hallway closet and pulled out a stack of flat, folded moving boxes I'd picked up at Home Depot the day before. I set them on the floor at Julian's feet. "Here, 10 boxes to get you started. You can buy the rest yourselves. Since there's no lease, I expect the house to be cleared out and broom clean by the end of next month." Julian stared at the brown cardboard as if it were a venomous snake. You're actually kicking us out," he stammered, completely blindsided. You just said you wanted to move," I reminded him. "I'm just helping you get the ball rolling." Chloe swallowed hard. She looked at the boxes, then at Julian. The bitter truth hit her right then. Moving meant a security deposit, first month's rent movers, and new utility deposits. They had zero savings because they'd spent every dime of my money on luxury items. Without my financial safety net, their big plan was impossible. The bubble they'd been living in had finally burst. 2 days passed and the boxes sat untouched in the hall. The reality of the rental market had hit them fast and hard. Julian spent all Sunday on his laptop looking for something affordable. There was nothing that even came close to what they wanted, and even the tiny apartments required a massive deposit. Monday evening, there was another knock on my door. This time, they were both there. Chloe was looking at the floor, her usual arrogance completely gone. Julian held the crumpled lease in his hands. "We can't move, Mom," Julian said, his voice cracking. "We don't have enough for a deposit. We'd be on the street. Please let us stay. We'll sign the lease and pay the rent on time." I let them in. They sat on the sofa like guests who were afraid to move. "It's not just about the money," I said clearly. "It's about respect. You treated me like a piece of furniture. If you stay, there are new rules. The upstairs is your space. The downstairs is mine. I don't cook for you. I don't do your laundry, and I don't pay your bills." "Understood." Chloe nodded slowly. She knew she had no cards left to play. I handed her a pen. "Then sign." With a shaking hand, she put her name on the document, followed by Julian. I took the lease and locked it in my desk drawer. The war was over. I didn't need lawyers, I didn't make threats, and I didn't scream. I just stopped being the pillow they were resting on. It was a liberating feeling to have the wheel back in my hands. They stood up and left my apartment in silence. I heard them walk quietly up the stairs. Not a single nasty word was said. The new order was official. They finally understood that I wasn't a helpless old woman to be pushed aside. Tomorrow, a new, quiet chapter of my life would begin. On my terms. 6 months have passed since that Christmas dinner. It's a sunny June morning. I'm out in my little garden, trimming the roses and taking a deep breath of the fresh air. My life has completely changed. On the first of every month, $1,500 lands in my bank account. The money I used to spend on Julian and Chloe's bills is now being saved or spent on things I actually enjoy. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community college, and I go to the theater with a friend every week. The house is much quieter now. Chloe and Julian live their lives, and I live mine. We pass each other in the hall or in the driveway and exchange polite greetings, but the old fake closeness is gone. There are no more shared dinners where I sit in silence while they brag about their expensive vacations. Chloe bought herself a modest used car, and Julian finally took charge of their finances. He still looks a bit tired sometimes, but that's the price of independence. Occasionally, he'll knock on my door to help me carry in heavy groceries. I thank him politely, but I don't invite him to stay. Our relationship is professional, now defined by clear, unbreakable boundaries. The burden Chloe talked about that night is finally gone. But it wasn't me who was the burden. I just stopped carrying theirs on my own shoulders. I put my garden shears away, washed my hands, and fixed myself a light lunch. My home finally feels like mine again. It's peaceful. Everyone has a limit, and mine was invisible for a long time. Now it's built of solid stone. If you don't protect yourself, you eventually become invisible. I decided not to let that happen. The sun is shining through the kitchen window. I take a sip of water, smile to myself, and enjoy the wonderful, priceless freedom of my later years. Everything is exactly as it should be. Perfect quiet and entirely my own. My life belongs to me again.